412 with Smitty and Tyler.
Welcome back to another episode of Around the 412. I'm Tyler. With me, as always, is my co-host Smitty. Go follow us on all our social medias at Around the 412 over on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. We're everywhere. Go subscribe to our YouTube as well. Leave a like on the videos. Leave comments. Ask questions in the comments. Let us know if you like what you saw. Go watch last week's Steelers episode and let us know which team you prefer. We had a little bit of a draft of the 2024 Steelers, Smitty's team versus my team. Let us know which team you prefer, but we are now like a week away from training camp.
Listen, unless you're brain dead, like Mike in Illinois, everyone knows that I got the better team.
Listen, everybody knows you got the better defense. If I'm going with the offense I feel more confident in, I selfishly am picking mine.
I realized something,
overall,
by the way, I messed up one pick if I could have it back.
Okay.
Because you had already taken Broderick Jones. There was absolutely no reason for me to have to draft Troy Fautanu when I did it way too early because you couldn't have drafted him anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I could have gotten a better skill. I could have gotten either a better receiver or Pat.
You could have
my offense. And I thought about it afterwards when I was watching it back. I was like, dang it, why did I do that? It didn't make any sense. I said I was making a chess move, but it was the opposite. It was the worst possible move I could have made.
That was a kindergarten move, pre-K. And either way, it was fun. It was fun to see how it shakes out. He definitely has the stout defense right now. There's literally one guy on your defense that I would not take, and that's just because I took Joey Porter Jr. First before you could.
And that's the thing. Or I could have taken another defensive player. Like my team could have been stupid when I took Troy Fautanu.
My defense is definitely built towards the future outside of like Deshaun Elliott, but neither here nor there. Go check that out. Leave a comment in the video to tell us which team you prefer, future or offense, defense, whatever you like. Mike in Illinois preferred mine, just saying. But this is Steelers episode. We are now, I think, less than a week away from Steelers reporting to training camp.
Well, yeah, so by the time people watch or listen to this comes out on Saturday the 20th. By the time you guys are watching or listening to this, we will have 3 days until the team reports for camp, 4 days until they actually practice. And I believe that first day isn't open to the public. So 5 days until you can go to practice to watch the Steelers. And then I'll be there the following one. Next Saturday and Sunday, the 27th, 28th, I will be at Steelers training camp with credentials. So maybe try to get some content for the YouTube channel that you wouldn't otherwise see on here typically. Thanks to Alan Saunders, co-host from Steelers Afternoon Drive, for that opportunity. Excited to be down there. But anyways, so this is the last week where you guys are going to be watching or listening to this show and being like, what are these guys doing? Like, this is clearly just filler content. Yeah, it is. Okay. We just need to put out a Steelers episode every single week. We're dedicated to the craft. This is the grind. Of course, we're doing a Steelers pod. What are we going to talk about on today's show? Well, training camp is next week. We're very excited. We assume the people watching, listening to this are very excited. But who are we most excited about? Whether it's players, whether it's battles, specific position groups, headlines to watch. Tyler, what's on your mind? What are you excited about when it comes to Steelers training camp?
Well, the one position that I think there's not a clear starter at as of right now, that I'm excited to see a battle for, is that nickel corner that we talked about a little bit last week when we were talking when we were doing our draft, talking about that corner position because we were drafting outside slots. But like between like Josiah Scott, Beanie Bishop, like which one of these guys are going to solidify themselves as the starting nickel? Because I feel like for the most part, the rest of the secondary is kind of chalked right now as far as who's going to be where. It's just that spot that we're still not sure about. That's something that I'm intrigued about. I'm excited to see how the line does with Troy Fautanu being in pads and being in an actual practice. Excited to see how Broderick Jones does moving over to the left side full time, and
especially
seeing what
against those edge rushers.
Yeah, playing tackle on the Steelers, you are not going to get a better training camp to get you ready for game day than going against TJ and Alex Highsmith. I don't think there's a defense in the NFL that will get you more ready as a tackle to be able to do that. I'm excited to see those guys be able to battle it out. I'm excited to see what Zach Frazier does because I'm projecting, and I feel like not just me, everybody's projecting game 1, he's going to be our starting center. How does he do? Does he adjust right away in the NFL and being able to take over that starting role? Obviously, the big one that I'm leaving out, quarterback. I feel like that's just been saturated so much. We've talked about it so much, but it is true. Like quarterback, we're going to see a lot more of not shorts football, what they can do in actual pads, how these guys perform. Is it going to be Russell? Is it going to be Justin? I'm excited to see how that works out. And then one other thing that I want to say I'm excited for it, I'm more intrigued for it, is a specific guy. I want to know how Cole Holcomb is going to come back from injury. He hasn't played football in a long time, especially at game speed. I know training camp isn't technically game speed, but he hasn't had the pads on in a long time. I'm curious to see how he can come back, because he can come back and be like his former self. I'm feeling way more comfortable about this middle linebacker room. The depth is really good in that room, and that will have me feeling really good about the defense as a whole.
Well, it's interesting because some people think that the health and it kind of being up in the air with Cole Holcomb is the reason the Steelers brought back Tyler Matakevich, who, special teams ace, spent time with the Bills. I'm not necessarily viewing it that way. I think it is a special teams thing. I think with the new roles, really going to be an emphasis. Like, of course, you want to have good players on special teams, but I think it's more important now than ever with the kickoff and kick return role changes to have players of that ilk. I mean, him and Miles Killebrew together. I posted a video, not joking whatsoever, though, of Kobe and Shaq, and said this is Miles Killebrew and Tyler Matakevich on the same special teams unit. So I'm very excited to see those two together, and really the entire special teams unit. Think that they drastically improved in that area. Whether you're talking, and a lot of people don't want to talk about special teams. Upgraded punter Cam Johnston, obviously an upgrade over Presley Harvin. Cordero Patterson should give him some juice in the return game, one of the best of all time. Miles Killebrew was already one of the best. He brought back Tyler Matakevich. We'll see if that pushes Mark Robinson off the roster potentially, because are they to keep 6 inside linebackers just because 2 of them are good special teamers? But he seems like a guy that'd be really good at special teams. Same with Ryan Watts. I know he's a rookie, but like he just kind of fits that build of a good special teamer. Same thing with Des Fitzpatrick. But is he going to do enough as a wide receiver to earn himself a role as a special team? Speaking of receiver, that's one that I got to see in training camp. Like someone asked us,
that's true.
On Steelers Afternoon Drive, like what are we most excited for in training camp? I said it's funny that you use the word excited, because I don't know that I'm necessarily excited about it, but I'm just intrigued because somebody's got to win jobs there. Like behind George Pickens, everybody's fighting for the way that they're going to be ranked behind him. It's still very possible, in my opinion, that somebody else is brought in. I mean, we're going to see quality receivers cut from around the league when rosters trimmed down. I mean, the Texans, for God's sake, they have like 8 NFL quality wide receivers right now on their roster. Something's got to give there. Does Tennessee potentially
the conversation about Brandon Aiyuk is ever ongoing for the Steelers?
This is we're at like step 3 now for where it needed to be to get like really ugly, because we hadn't even gotten that official trade request yet, but that happened over the last week, which is like step 3. Now, step 4 would be, does he not show up to training camp? The way things are going, I'm kind of leaning no. But what makes it so weird here, and like I keep trying to emphasize this because I don't know if enough people are talking about it. We're talking about a guy on a 5th-year option, not a tag. So like if a player doesn't sign his tag and doesn't show up to training camp, no harm, no foul, he can't be fined because he hasn't signed a deal. Brandon Aiyuk is under contract on his 5th-year option. He will be fined if he does not report to training camp. So, like, is he willing to eat that? Like, I mean, as somebody that hasn't gotten that big payday yet, that's going to be interesting. Like, I get it. From his point of view, doesn't have much leverage. He's trying to do whatever he can to force the 49ers' hand to either pay him or trade him. Those are the 2 things that he wants. The 49ers don't seem willing to pay him relative to the market value at $30 million. We actually got a question about this, so I guess we could kind of bring it up now, or trade him. And why would they? One of the top 10 receivers in football. But Jonathan says, you're Omar Khan. The 49ers say they'll send you Aiyuk for a first, and you have to accommodate his $30 million AAV asking price. Do you pull the trigger? Jonathan, I do. I think when you look at the history of first-round picks for receivers, especially at the back end more so, the first-round receivers in the early or middle portions of the first round have pretty good hit rates, at least since 2020. Nick and I were having a conversation about this on Steelers Afternoon Drive. But as you get into where we kind of expect the Steelers to be picking in the 2025 draft, it's a lot murkier. as to what the hit rate is at that point. Obviously, you have the Justin Jeffersons of the world. Well, you also have the Jalen Reagors. You have the Quentin Johnstons in that 20 range. And right now, while you and I would certainly say defensive tackle, somewhere along the defensive line could definitely be prioritized in the first round next year, wide receiver certainly in that conversation too. So are you going, you potentially you're talking about spending a first round pick on a receiver anyway. Why not use that first round pick to acquire one of the best in football? Now, I know you're talking about the $30 million price tag as well that it would take to accommodate him with a long-term future. But again, to me, you're talking about one of the 10 best receivers in football. You're talking about a guy that you can build this passing game around. One of the best blockers at the position too, if not the best blocker. I don't know enough people talk about that, but he can do everything. Like, he runs routes, can play on the outside, can play on the inside, but like, you wouldn't have a guy like that play on the inside anyway, but he can, I guess, if you want him to, can block. He just does everything at a very high level. Man, zone, everything. I think that this is the guy worth paying, especially when you're not paying anybody else on offense. The question then becomes, are you also paying George Pickens? I don't know if the answer to that is yes or no, but I will say this, and I don't know that everybody's going to necessarily be on board with me on this. If I'm picking one, I'm picking Brandon Aiyuk over George Pickens if I can only pay one anyway.
I don't disagree with that. I think that you look at the body of work that George has had, it's been solid, but I don't think that he's established himself in the same light that Brandon Aiyuk has. And as far as extending him, if you do extend Aiyuk, if you get it, you end up getting Aiyuk and having that contract with you. What George does in the next season or so is going to have a lot to do with what the contract he's going to get. Because I don't think that it's out of the realm of possibility that George could come back as well, but he would have to earn a big enough payday for it to be realized that he's not able to come back.
I just thought about something though as well. And this is kind of a wild scenario. Again, we're getting pretty far down the line here. What if that happens? You have both for this year, and then you trade George because he's also looking for a new contract that you're not going to pay, and you pretty much offset the cost anyway and get a pick back. Like, I don't know that you're going to get a first back for George, right? But you're getting something back where it's now maybe the difference. Say you get a 2 or something, a mid 2 or something back for George, and then you're like, okay, we paid a first and $30 million to get Brandon Aiyuk, but we got this back for George. So it kind of like offsets that cost a little bit.
That could work as well. And when you look at the offensive side of the ball, you just don't have a lot of big contracts. It's a lot of guys on either rookie deals or cheap contracts. And I know that it's up in the air what is going to happen at quarterback. We have no idea past 2024 how quarterback's going to shake out. But you look at everything else. You don't have any other wide receivers on big contracts. Your offensive line, both your tackles are on rookie contracts. Your center's on a rookie contract. James Daniels is going to be gone. You're not paying him. Isaac Samalo eventually is going to be gone soon. And he's not even making a lot of money that he could
going
be.
Into next year. He'll be on the last year.
And then Pat Freiermuth may get extended this offseason, but at the same time, it's a tight end extension. You're not talking about like a large amount of money. You're going to be moving on from Najee Harris most likely and having Jalen Moore re-signed. That's going to be a cheaper deal. Like, this is the side of the ball where if you're going to shell out a lot of money right now, you're able to do it. And nobody is making that type of money there. So I think that the $30 million contract, people are getting held up on that. I don't think that there should be even a second thought for why you make that trade, because I think he's worth that money. I think that there's more outside of the contract you're giving him that would be red flags that for an Aiyuk trade outside of, like, don't worry about the money. You can spend the money elsewhere.
What's interesting to me is this conversation, like trying to understand from the Steelers' perspective. Obviously, they're interested. They've touched base with the 49ers. The 49ers have said they're not trading him, but they've tried to. Like, when they asked about Deebo Samuel, they asked about Brandon Aiyuk at the same time. Clearly, they see that the way that this is playing out, and Brandon Aiyuk once paid, they had got to have a pretty good idea of what he once paid. So from my point of view, the Steelers are absolutely fine with the price tag. The question is, obviously, the 49ers would have to be willing to trade him, but are they going to give up the draft compensation that it would require to acquire him? That's more so my question than them paying him, because I like, if you're not going through all of this trying to trade for somebody if you're not going to pay them once you trade for them? Like that would completely defeat the purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously the Steelers would be willing to pay Brandon Aiyuk. It's just a matter of getting him here from the 49ers.
And that's kind of what I was alluding to. I think that the actual trade itself would be more of a red flag for the Steelers than the contract they would have to shell out.
Oh, okay. So when you were saying about I thought you were saying from the fan base. I thought you were saying red flags from the fan base.
No, for the
about
Steelers
Brandon.
themselves. I think that the money. I don't think that the Steelers would be worried about that. I think that the red flag would be the actual trade, what you're doing, because we haven't really seen from Omar Khan that he is willing to give up that type of assets for a trade like that. Now, granted, his window has been small for the sample size, but at the same time, they could have made this trade before this year's draft. Why didn't they then? They could have made this trade earlier this summer. Why didn't they then? I'm not saying it's impossible that it happens now because, like you mentioned, like the different dominoes have been falling to make this type of trade more likely, but I don't feel, and this is just vibes only, people. I don't feel like the Steelers would make the trade simply because of the assets giving up.
And here's another part of this conversation because, like I said, I think it still needs to get murkier. Got to start missing training camp, Brandon Aiyuk, and then the threat be there that he's going to miss games. Now, my question would be is what does he even look like once he does get to Pittsburgh? And then is he going to be able to pick up the offense quickly enough to even be able to contribute right away?
Can he afford to do that? How much are the fines we're talking about?
Yeah, I don't know what those fines are, to be honest. But like I said, it's not like he's got. I know he was a first-round pick, but he was a back end of the first-round pick, and he hasn't gotten his payday yet. Like I don't know what those fines look like over time. So I don't know if he can afford to do so.
Players on rookie contracts are subject to a $40,000 fine per day.
Per day.
Yeah, how long's training camp? Like how many days would it be?
I don't know. 30-ish, probably.
Of actual practice, though? Because I'm assuming they're not counting weekends.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many practice.
I mean, say you have like 20 days of actual practice.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you are talking about a fine total of $800,000 as a rookie. I mean, I don't know how much he's set to make this year, Aiyuk, but as a rookie, getting fined nearly $1 million, or a rookie contract, excuse me, not a rookie, but that is significant. I don't know that Aiyuk can hold out that long to be able to get fined $40,000 a day.
Very true. Very true. I don't know. I don't know what his plan of attack is here, but he seems very committed to it, whatever it is, at least for the time being. So again, he's trying to use what he possibly can as leverage. He's in a unique spot. This doesn't, like with guys on 5th-year options, doesn't typically happen. Like these players, this is why it's not been amended, if you will, by the NFL and the Players Association, because it doesn't affect that many players. So like it's not very high on their priority list to try to do anything with.
I'm just waiting for him to tweet out, "Come get me" at Mike Tomlin.
His twin. Yeah. I don't know. We'll see how this saga continues to play out. But again, I think it's got to get a lot murkier, uglier for anything to actually take place, because the 49ers, in my opinion, would be stupid to trade him. Because Brandon Aiyuk is a game changer. What's going on, everybody? Smitty from Around the 412, and I just want to take a quick second to give a shout out to our folks at Game Changers. Their logo on the screen right now, right above my microphone. Over 2,000 different designs in their catalog. Luxury heavyweight material. I am wearing one of their shirts right now. Best vintage t-shirts in the game. Head over to gamechanger.la or pick6.la to pick up some shirts. And guess what? Use code AT412. Save yourself $10 on your order every single time. Again, gamechanger.la or pick6.la. Best vintage t-shirts in the game. Check them out. Can you believe they don't have a Brandon Aiyuk tee on Game Changer? Maybe they're waiting for the Steeler.
Maybe they're waiting for which team to put it in. That's the thing.
But yeah, use code AT412. Save yourself $10. Not on just the Pittsburgh specific design, on any of the 3,000 now plus designs over there.
What I was going to say is, before we got on the Aiyuk tangent, which I feel like has happened every single week. I mean, We're sorry about that.
Yeah, well, I
But
apologize. Yeah.
we're talking about wide receivers. I'm very interested to see, since we're talking about things we want to see in training camp,
Oh man,
how
yeah,
much
that's
of a
where that
leap.
conversation started, huh?
Yeah. I'm very interested to see how much of a leap, specifically speaking of a wide receiver, Roman Wilson makes between OTAs to training camp. Because,
Yeah.
like was talked about, he was the worst wide receiver at OTAs. But like Alan, your co-host on Steelers Afternoon Drive, said, that's nothing new. That is what he would have said for Joey Porter Jr. last year. And I'm not saying Joey Porter Jr. was a world beater in training camp. He was far from it. He was still handsy and everything. But I feel like you have to see some sort of leap from what you saw a month and a half ago to what you're going to get in training camp. For you to feel confident about what you can get from Roman Wilson this season. I don't think you can expect that leap to come from OTAs to the season. It has to be somewhere in the middle. I don't think that you're going to magically get into a game scenario and he's automatically going to be your wide receiver too. I think you start to need to see that in training camp. So that's one specific wide receiver that I'm really looking at. Maybe the obvious one, but the other one that I'm also going to be looking at as well is to see if kind of the opposite story of Roman Wilson is Calvin Austin still living up to the hype that he got during OTAs. Because we saw a lot of hype around Calvin Austin about him potentially being wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. Is he going to still have that through training camp, carry that into the season? Because we're expecting a lot of big things from him this season. And I feel like that's something that shouldn't go away in training camp if that's going to be the case.
I'm a believer in both of those guys as contributors, just not at the level that the Steelers need them to contribute, if that makes sense, with the state of the receiver room.
It does.
Because they need them to be massive contributors as it stands right now with the state of that receiver room. I just don't know that I'm relying on Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson in his rookie year to do so. I'm a believer in Roman Wilson because I believe in the person. It's Nick wrote a story, one of the last ones he wrote at Steelers Now, kind of talking about his roots. Also from Hawaii. He used to take a flight 2 hours every single day just to be able to play football. He had to take a flight 2 hours every single day to go practice and then fly back. Like, this dude is dedicated to the game of football, loves the game. And so it's not going to be his work ethic that is ever the reason that he's going to fail. I think that he has limitations because of what he is physically, things outside of his control. And I think the same thing could be said about Calvin Austin. The thing with Calvin Austin is he hurt his foot in 2022 and we didn't get to see him at all. Last year was basically his rookie year and it was in a Matt Canada offense. I just don't think that we've seen him get unlocked yet for what he actually can be. I don't know that he's I think calling him a gadget guy is probably a bit of a disservice, but I think that he's closer to that than actually being like a legit wide receiver 2.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could probably get away with him being like a 3, certainly a 4. I would feel super comfortable with. That's why it's I think the depth of this receiver room is better. You're just missing that 2 behind Pickens to say that it's there's not a Deontay Johnson here. Because if Deontay Johnson was still on this roster and everything else went the exact same way with the receiver room, I think they would have upgraded the room from last year to this year. But he's not, and they didn't fill that void, in my opinion, sufficiently. So I think that's going to be super fun to see who separates themselves there. There's certain individual battles that I'm super excited to see. Patrick Queen versus Jalen Warren, backs on backers. I'm stoked about just because there's history there going back to Patrick's time with the Ravens. They've both talked about the hatred that they had there and, chirping back and forth and stuff. So now that they're on the same side, I think it's going to be fun to see how that goes. Zach Frazier versus Keanu Benton. You mentioned Zach Frazier a little bit earlier, but they both have the wrestling backgrounds. Just excited to see how that goes in the trenches. Keanu's probably going to take his lunch early on, I would expect, but hopefully it evens out a bit as we get further into training camp. And then I just talked about the receivers, but speed on speed, I want to see Dante Jackson go against a lot of the receivers, but specifically Calvin Austin. Dante, probably not the same high 4.2 or super low 4.3 guy just because of the injuries that he's had over the last few seasons, but he can still fly. And if the Steelers wide receiver room is anything, it's super fast. I mean, when you're talking about Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, Scotty Miller, Quez Watkins, these guys can fly. So I want to see how he holds up against that speed.
I agree with all that. Another battle, mainly just for the defensive side to see how he still handles it because of all the hype that has been this offseason. I would love to see what Joey Porter Jr. versus George Pickens looks like.
Part two.
Yeah, part two. The hype that he has gotten this offseason, it's going to be a lot to live up to for Joey Porter Jr. I think he has the abilities to be able to do it, but that's going to start in training camp. I think that would be a good battle to see. I'm curious to see, and this one isn't necessarily a battle, but I'm curious to see how they're going to be using a guy like Peyton Wilson, how much he's going to be involved in the linebackers as well. I expect him to contribute this season, and especially because of the speed that he has, I think that kind of sets him apart in their linebacker room. That gives him an ability that no one else really has, at least to the level that he has. And I think that the Steelers are going to be able to utilize that. But I'm curious to see maybe not just like how he performs, but like how many snaps is he actually getting in training camp. And that's another thing that I'm curious about, like the division of the actual snaps with the ones or with the twos, like what you're getting from even in the running back room. Like how are they going to handle with all this offseason discourse of Najee Harris's fifth-year option not getting picked up, and it looks like the writing on the wall that he's going to be gone. How is the Steelers going to handle that as far as like who's getting the most snaps with the ones? How are they divvying it up? Like, because we've talked about before, like, should it be closer to 50-50, 60-40? In the past, it's been at least 60-40, if not even less, for Jaylen Warren. I'm curious to see if that's going to be closer to 50-50 now that we know and everybody knows that Najee Harris is going to be gone. Jaylen Warren's your running back of the future. Are the Steelers going to still treat it that way?
It's a good question. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. I wouldn't say we're going to get the answer to that necessarily during training camp. That's probably something we're going to have to wait to actually see in the game. And honestly, It could depend on just who they feel like fits the offense better. Like, I don't think that there is like a quota, if you will, in terms of the amount of touches these guys have to get. So we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. I'm excited to see. We've talked about guys that we're excited for, right? Who is there anybody that you think like has to have a very good camp, whether it's to earn a starting spot, even a roster spot? Like I know I mentioned, like we had a conversation with about Tyler Medikevich. Does that push Mark Robinson potentially off the roster, depending on what happens in training camp? But is there somebody that jumps off the page to you like this guy has to have a really good training camp?
I mean, I look at, well, you mentioned the wide receivers. Several of the wide receivers have to have really good training camps to stay on this roster because they're littered with so few of actual talented
I don't know why
ones.
I don't know why the one that jumps out to me is Quez Watkins. Like, I think if he wants to stick on this roster, he's have to be really good in training camp at the preseason games.
Yeah, I get that. I there wasn't one that really stuck out to me as far as the wide receivers goes. I just look at like the bottom, like if you look at a depth chart, the bottom 6 because there's just so many that are competing.
They have a
with
ton
each
of
other.
like wide receiver 4 or 5s.
Yeah, absolutely. They don't have that quality in the middle, but they have a ton of those guys. Someone that's like DeMarvin Leal is probably somebody that I think has to perform in training camp. He has been that in between player that we've talked about, hasn't really lived up to where the Steelers have drafted him in that 3rd round, and I could see him being cut this after training camp because I just don't think that he has a for sure place on this roster because, quite frankly, I just don't think they really know where to put him full time.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I would have thought about him for sure. I wonder too if something's got to give in the secondary. Like DeMonte Casey isn't like the last year of his deal, so maybe it's not necessarily that important. But I know they want to like run a lot of 3 safety sets. Like could a guy like Ryan Watts potentially push him off the because they're viewing Ryan Watts as safety, it seems like for sure. He played corner at Texas, but he played mainly safety in the spring. I think that's going to be where his home is. They really like what he can do on special teams. I don't know. Could he push a DeMonte Casey in the last year of his contract off the roster? I think that has to be interesting to see. Just brought in Mason McCormick. If Zach Frazier wins the starting job at center, where does that leave a guy like Nate Herbig? Because you also have Spencer Anderson as depth on the interior. Like, could he be a trade candidate? So like not necessarily having a bad spring, but a bad training camp, but could how good other guys look in training camp potentially push him to be a trade candidate or off the roster?
Yeah, no, I think those are good points. I think that DeMonte KZ, what we thought we were getting when we talked about that 3 safety look, is just never come to fruition, and that's
Everybody's
not
always
necessarily.
Smitty's hurt.
I would say that's
Yeah.
not a fault of anybody. That's just health. That's something that we haven't gotten to. Do they still want that? Do they still think that that's going to be the case with DeMonte KZ still on the option? If you have someone that like Ryan Watts that could take the field on defense, but is primarily a special teams guy, I think that that's something that could potentially do it if he's really good at special teams. We talked about how valuable this team sees guys like that are those special teamers. So I think that that's definitely a case. And actually, Herbig was one that I was thinking about along the offensive line. I just think it could get cluttered in the offensive line, and he could just be unfortunately draw the short straw on that one if James or if Zach Frazier does win the starting job, and you have Spencer Anderson that
If you can flip him for a day 3 pick, I think that's a win. Like for a 2025, just keep getting that draft capital, and it gives him an opportunity probably for a better opportunity somewhere else. I think it's a weird fit here, to be honest, scheme wise, and I think that there's enough depth that we have built up here with Spencer Anderson fully focusing on the interior now, where as long as Mason McCormick looks the part in training camp, I think it's very much on the table for Herbig to not be in black and gold.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a question for you that, since we're just talking about roster spots, and this one is the most obvious roster spot that I didn't want to talk about too much, but the question I have about the quarterbacks, do you think we will know the starter out of training camp, or do you think it's going to come after the preseason?
I think they'll want to name one. You mean by the time the preseason's over, or even like games are starting?
Like games are starting, or just sometime during the actual preseason games. But like, do you think we'll find out after training camp with that lull period of the games, or do you think that it's going to take till preseason?
I think you'll find out like a week before the first preseason game. Okay. Who they intend to be the starter. What'd be interesting is like, what if it's Russ and Russ is like really bad and Justin's great? Could it be different in the second preseason game based off that?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like true. I think that they're going to want to have a set starter in place for sure, knowing Tomlin. It's just like how fluid is that situation going to be, or will he allow it to be? I don't know. With the way that they value consistency, probably not very fluid, but it'll be interesting to see. I wanted to bring up one more thing though, because we were talking about the safeties. 3 safety sets, like the big nickel stuff. To me, we could see a lot more of that, assuming health, of course, as opposed to like we keep talking about those guys for that starting nickel spot with Josiah Scott, Beanie Bishop. What if the answer there is Deshaun Elliott or Minka with the other two, including KZ and the other one of those two on the back end? Because Minka played a lot of slot corner last year. Deshaun Elliott's done it in the past, with Miami obviously last year, Baltimore in the past. I think that we could see a lot more 3 safety stuff than we do like a traditional like Beanie Bishop or Josiah Scott.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And I think that, to be honest, it's probably just a credit to the underwhelming cast that is competing for the nickel spot. No discredit to those guys, but just there's nobody that is still jumping off the page for that position. And I feel like that's a problem going into training camp. You would at least like to have somebody that you feel comfortable is going to win that job, but you don't have that yet. So that's the only position that I look at on the roster outside of like wide receiver, where you're talking about like wide receiver 3, 4, 5. I'm not talking about the depth of a position, but like looking at the starters of a position, you're not sure who's going to be taking the field if the Steelers were playing the game tomorrow. And so when you look at that, I don't disagree with you at all, but does having Minka in those nickel situations, and I know you being in nickel is far less than being in other formations of the defense, but is being in nickel for Minka something that they want to do if they were talking about him getting put back to playing Minka ball?
Yeah, I mean, probably not with like regularity, but I think that he can help in that area, like help solve the problem. I think it would be Elliott more so than anybody else when they do the 3 safety stuff, though.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way that I viewed it. unlike receiver, I think defensive line is a spot where you could see like a quality player actually get cut. Smitty from around the 412 here. And while I may not have much hair, the hair that I do have will not be cut by anybody besides Keek at Keek's Barbershop. My friend Christian Circle, been with us since day one. Keek's Barbershop, located 401 Burkitch Way, Suite 2 in Beaver, PA. Download the app, The Cut. Book an appointment with Christian today, or you can do walk-in with Tony or Ashley. But again, Keek's Barbershop, 401 Burkitch Way, Suite 2 in Beaver, PA. Go check them out. Old school vibe in there. Absolutely love it. Cannot recommend them enough. Wouldn't go anywhere else. Maybe I'll see you there. So that'll be interesting to watch too. You mentioned Liao. I guess Loudermilk part of that conversation if he doesn't play well. Certainly Logan Lee, the draft pick, I think is far from a 53 lock. So we'll see how that shakes out along the defensive line. The last thing that I want to talk about, then we do have one more question to get to. This is typically the time of year where we would see an extension or extensions take place. Steelers certainly have their fair share of candidates. Do you think something's got to give here? I mean, there's so much potential turnover going from 2024 to 2025. I feel like for the sake of continuity, at the very least, they want to extend one or two of these guys. It's not going to be James Daniels, very clearly. It's not going to be Najee Harris. I don't see the quarterback stuff. Cam Hayward stuff has been, I don't want to say like tenuous, but obviously I think if it were up to him, he would have already gotten something done here. So something's got to give in that situation. Jaylen Warren certainly could. There's some other guys that like we're not necessarily talking about, but they're on the last year of the deal. They're certainly extension candidates. Landon Roberts could be extended. Just mentioned DeMonte KZ. Dante Jackson, I guess, as well. He's on the last year of his deal. To me, the one that I just keep coming back to is Pat Freiermuth. Like, I think this is, and I feel like because people know that I have a friendship with him at this point, I feel like I got to put this out there. This is literally just a prediction. No knowledge. I feel like something gets done. But I want to preface by saying that because I don't want people taking it as me knowing anything further at this time. So predictively, I think that an extension gets done. That's the one that I'll say. Beyond that, I can't find like another one unless they want to just reward Jaylen Warren and say you're making
that would be an absolute spit in the eye to Najee Harris if it's like the same year we're not picking up your 5th-year option. We're just going to extend him in the same offseason.
I mean, I get it, but at the same time, like Jaylen Warren at times was playing for free last year because of the fines and stuff. Like, I think for somebody that makes as little money as him, as much as they rely on him right now and will going forward, he deserves to be rewarded for that. So I don't know if I'm giving out 2 extensions right now, it's Pat Freiermuth and Jaylen Warren.
I agree with that, actually. Pat Freiermuth is the one that I think will get done. We've talked about that on the show, and that's been heavily speculated that it will get done. Valuable type pass-catching tight end. Your pass catcher 2 right now on the team. I don't think that you can stress that enough. And he's been really good. I think that that one will get done. Jaylen Warren, while I did say that would be a spit in the eye to Najee Harris, that doesn't mean I don't want the extension to happen or wouldn't think it would happen. I just think that would be totally ironic.
Well, and I have to say, I don't think it's going to happen. I'm just, if I were to hand out a second one behind Pat, that's the one that I would look at because I don't think it's going to be super expensive, and I just think it's doing right by the player.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. I think that for what Jaylen Warren has brought to your offense and what he's going to continue to do with the absence of Najee Harris after this season, I think that he definitely deserves an extension. Looking at the defensive side of the ball, I just told you a few weeks ago after your guys' Steelers afternoon drive with Landon Roberts how much I love him as a player and as a person. I think that could be a good extension.
That could be a sneaky one that no one's talked about because if Cole Holcomb isn't going to be back to health, I know that they got Peyton Wilson as a 3rd-round pick kind of waiting in the wings, but I don't like, isn't he kind of similar to Patrick? Like I just view him as a guy that can contribute in different ways, but I don't know that I ever view him as like a true 3-down linebacker. I don't know. Maybe I'm way up. I like Peyton Wilson a lot, but him and Patrick Queen seem like a weird combination. I would almost rather extend Elandon by, another year or 2 and just see how it goes from there. And at the very least, you got quality depth in a guy like Peyton Wilson you're going to see all 3 play quite a bit, I think. So I don't know. Landon's one that nobody's talking about, but I wouldn't completely roll out either.
Landon one, I think is very likely because you look at what you just mentioned with Cole Holcomb. We have no idea what this guy's going to be like when he comes back. If he is not up to snuff, then you could see him being a cut candidate, extending a Landon Roberts. And obviously, we have confidence in Peyton Wilson, what he's going to be, but we're not expecting him, like you just mentioned, to be a 3-down linebacker. You're not expecting him to be on the field all the time. And behind those guys, Mark Robinson, who we're also talking about potentially being cut, Tyler Mitakevich, who just signed a 1-year deal. How comfortable do you feel about your middle linebacker room right now if Cole Holcomb can't go? I feel like a Landon Roberts is someone based off of what he did last season, especially in the absence of Cole Holcomb and Quan Alexander, the level of play that he brought when those guys went down. Then looking at what he can do moving forward with the depth that you have at the linebacker position, if Cole Holcomb and co, like if they don't live up to what we hope they can be post-injury, I feel like that's something that could be talked about. On the defensive side of the ball, I mean, Deshaun Elliott, like I don't really think about it that much with him. Like there's no one that really sticks out on the defensive sides outside of like the Cam Hayward situation. That one's been talked about though. That one they've been glaring all off season.
You meant DeMonte KZ, I'm assuming. You said Deshaun Elliott, but
yeah, DeMonte KZ, not Deshaun Elliott. DeMonte KZ though, we just talked about how Ryan Watts could potentially take his roster spot. So that one,
and
I feel like
Deshaun Elliott was just brought in to take his starting spot.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It'd be kind of weird if he got an extension.
But yeah, Cam Hayward is the one that's been like glaring all off season. Does it get done? My gut says probably.
I don't know.
But
like
I don't know.
Like every day, every week that passes, I feel a little bit less sure about it. I almost feel like, and not to say that he's going to retire or play somewhere else after this year. It's just they might wait until after the season. Like it might not happen prior to this year. Is really where I'm coming from. They might want to see what he looks like, after having a full off season. Because I know that he came back last year, but that was not Cam Hayward. So hopefully having the full off season recover. I can tell you he's not very good at first base in a softball game, but I don't know if that's because of the injury or anything like that. So I don't know. Which is, by the way, like we got to promote that event next year. It's really good stuff that they do. Really cool. The amount of interaction that you're able to have if you go to that game, the Three Rivers Celebrity Softball game at Washington Wild Things Park. It's a really good time. So like anybody that has never been before, make your way to that in 2025 because you'll get to interact with a lot of players, a lot of different local celebrities for a great cause. So they play 7 innings of softball and then they do a home run derby afterwards. So Pat was kind of the star of the show, to be quite honest with you. Hit 2 home runs in the game, and then he hit the most home runs in the derby as well. So kind of
maybe they should extend him.
the Wild Things.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know about baseball. Softball though, he's got down pat. No pun intended. And then the question that we had, I think this is interesting. So the Pirates, we'll bring the Pirates into this conversation because Job came to us, and this is actually maybe making history on this show right here. First question that we've gotten via Facebook, I think, unless it's happened in the past. I don't know if this has happened before. Says, who has the stronger second half of the season this year, Pirates or Steelers? And will the Steelers have more Pro Bowlers than the Pirates have All-Stars? So the Pirates had 2 All-Stars this year, Paul Skeens, Brian Reynolds. Will the Steelers match or exceed that or have less with just 1 or 0? And then who will have the stronger half? And then a lot of people have talked about the Steelers second half, obviously. Entire division in the second half, as well as Washington, Philly, and Kansas City in the second half. So, it's interesting because I feel like the Steelers have to do a lot of their damage in the first half. Not to say that they're just going to like lay an egg the second half of the season, but I think that's very imperative to go into their bye, with like 2 losses because of the gauntlet that they face down the stretch. With the Pirates being 500, what did we say? We think like 85, 86 wins will do it. They're obviously still going to need to play above 500 ball, probably 5 or 6 games above 500. How do you equate the 2 sports together, though? Like,
I don't know. It's tough because it's like
162-17.
Yeah, that's the thing. How many games in baseball does one game in the NFL equate to? I guess you can technically do the math on it, but
it is 9.5 seasons of football, basically. Baseball.
I mean, I would say that who do I think is going to have a better second half?
Mm-hmm.
Naturally, I'm going to say the Pirates, just because I like the starting rotation. I like where they're at being 500 post All-Star break. Think they're going to add to the team. If you want to hear our thoughts on that, listen to our Pirate show that we just recorded.
Yeah, there you go.
But in that same breath, the Steelers overall, probably feel more comfortable about not just absolutely falling into a pit like I do the Pirates, even though I think the Pirates could have the better second half. Like, I'm definitely more comfortable saying Steelers.
So if someone were to say which one's going to make the playoffs, your answer is Steelers. But you think the Pirates could have the better second half?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And part of that also has to do with the NL race with the wild cards right now and how many teams are there. But I do think the Steelers are probably more likely. It's just, you look at that second half the Steelers have, and it is so freaking tough. I mean, all of your divisional opponents, Kansas City, Philly, like, I don't think that can be understated, saying how tough that is to have to go through your entire division plus several good out of division opponents. And what's the state of the Steelers going to be like that? What are injuries going to be like that? No. Without seeing them play, it's tough to say for me the Steelers are going to be better in the second half, knowing just what they have on paper to go up against.
Yeah, I feel it. What do you think about the All-Star part? So 2 All-Stars for the Pirates.
I'll say there's going to be more Pro Bowlers on the Steelers.
Okay.
And it might just be one more, but mainly I like looking at the defense. Is it that outlandish to say that TJ Minka and Patrick Queen, just the 3 of those guys, are Pro Bowlers? I'm not saying that's a guarantee, but just looking at the level of player.
The opportunity's there for a ton of guys, I think. You mentioned 3, Joey Porter Jr., right? I mean, if he has a year 2 like he had in year 1, I know that people are going to call bias on this one. I think Pat's got a shot to be a Pro Bowler this year, specifically in this offense. And in that same breath, because of the opportunity, could George be a first-time Pro Bowler this year with improved QB play from Russ? Could one of the running backs get enough opportunity? One of the offensive linemen? Maybe. I just think the opportunity is there to have more than 2. So I'm with you. I think it will be 3 or 4.
Yeah, I mean, even if you look at special teams too, there's always an
Miles
chance. Like,
was just there last year.
Miles could be another Pro Bowler. I mean, and I'm not going to take anything away from Boswell. I know there's a lot of good kickers, but he might randomly be in there as well. I think that the odds are definitely more likely that there's going to be more Steelers in the Pro Bowl. But I do think that just looking at the schedule without seeing the Steelers play, I'm leaning towards Pirates are going to have a better second half, because we're talking about Pirates having to be like 5 games above 500 to be probably around the threshold for a wild card. If we're talking about the Steelers being 500 in their last games, what is the state of the Steelers at? I know we're going to be happy with 500, but I don't think it's out of the question that it could be below 500 in that game, in that stretch as well. And I understand that that's probably going to be a tough pill to swallow if that comes to the case, but just look at the schedule. It's tough.
Yeah. On paper, certainly, things should change, but absolutely, when you look at it right now, it looks very daunting. I think that's it. It's funny because we came into this like today, just a couple hours ago, not knowing what we were going to talk about. Juiced out a 50-minute podcast. So you guys are welcome. Be sure to tweet at us, thank us at around the 412. No, I'm just joking, but we appreciate you guys. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Everything custom designs. Get yourself some Pittsburgh merch, whether it's ours. Haley does some around the 412 stuff as well. Going to be coming out with hats, as well as the tumblers that she's doing, t-shirts, hoodies, long sleeve tees. Be sure to check that out. We also got some shorts from our guy DC4L Customs. If anybody's on the Twitter sphere. You're probably very familiar with him, does a lot of great stuff, has done a lot of custom stuff for a lot of people. So be sure to check that out as well. The link in the description is there for year 7, rocking around the 412. So be sure to check that out as well. Every single penny that is donated, you guys know this at this point, goes directly to helping out families, providing Christmas in its entirety to children in the 724 and 412 areas. Over the last couple of years, we've partnered up with the East Rochester Salvation Army. Absolutely plan on doing that again this year. But if you have a family that you'd like to submit or nominate, I don't know the right word to use for that because it just sounds so weird. But if you think he's going to need some help with the holidays, be sure to hit us up. Shout out to our donators so far, already raised $300. We haven't even really promoted it a ton yet. So thanks to those people for doing so. Everything Custom Designs link down there as well. Game Changers or Pick 6, both of those websites. Use code AT412 at checkout. Save yourself $10. Like I said, be sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell here. Hit us in the comments. Follow us everywhere at Around the 412. If you are listening somewhere else, be sure to leave us a 5-star review and subscribe over there. For Tyler, for Smitty, this has been the Around the 412 Steelers show. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.